Back and better than ever. This is Talking Point WSN. Sean Michael Small with my co-host Keaton Shaw. Keaton!
Good morning, Sean.
Good to see you.
Good morning to all of you. You keep saying back and better than ever. Where did we go?
Well, we leave at 9:30 and then we come back every morning.
Oh.
You know, AM Prime into Talking Point. See, so every morning we're back and better than ever.
Are we really better than ever?
Yes! Come on, man. Fake it till you make it. Let's go. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. Pretty hot these days.
Pretty hot?
I think this morning was the first time that I could remember. Usually, you know, when I get out of bed at 6, 7, 8 o'clock, because it's nice and cool, right? Oh no. It felt like the afternoon, sweltering heat. I was just like, oh no, this is a different existence.
Last night at 10 o'clock, I checked the weather and we were 29 degrees Celsius.
Oh.
At 10 o'clock in the night.
Yeah.
That's absolutely ridiculous.
Honestly, generally speaking, where I am, I find that my house is warm. Even up until sometimes midnight, it could feel warm. And then by around 1, 2, that's when it starts to get really cool to cold. And that kind of holds over until about 8, 9 o'clock the next morning. But this morning, 6 o'clock, I'm like, hey, this is kind of, you know, tropical.
I actually feel like the slice of fried plantain that's now hitting the hot oil in the pan. That's what it felt like yesterday.
You know, somehow it did not feel the hottest to me personally yesterday, but it just felt hot overall. Right, but we'll get into that a little bit later. We have some other stuff to get into.
Some other hot topics.
Yes, the cliche continues. Folks, let's start off the hot topics with today's Daily Review. And the first thing that I wanted to get into this morning, it's come up before. The Labour Minister, someone who we tend to not hear enough of. I think you always ask the question, you know, where is he over several things. I think you're still waiting for the policy with regards to, was it COVID?
Yeah,
work from home for the public service?
Yeah, let's just
like that's never going to happen.
No, don't worry about it.
I mean, could you imagine the public service working from home? They already stay home, so like, anyway. So the Minister of Labour has said that Cabinet will come to a decision soon with regards to increasing the minimum wage, which, well, in the coming weeks is technically, one could argue, soon for TNT in some respects. He does not necessarily commit to a large increase. And the reason why I say this is, I think, ironically, as much as in the basic premise of economics, increasing the minimum wage could cause inflation. When you look at the actual minimum wage, and it's actually Janelle that pointed this out to me, she did the basic math. It seems as though our minimum wage, depending on what the use is for, doesn't really seem to mean anything. The amount of money a month is roughly less than 3,000, or at about 3,000 in a 30, 31-day month. So I don't even know what jobs use a minimum wage. And I don't think...
Quite a number of jobs you'd actually be very surprised. For example, I think amalgamated security guards.
Really?
Yeah. In fact...
A security guard is working in such a risky job for 28 to 3,000?
Well, here's an interesting thing. It was circulation recently that amalgamated did increase the salaries of security guards, I think by something like 25 cents an hour. Right? Amalgamated security.
That doesn't matter.
But yes, Janelle did the math. $17.50 an hour, let's say you work 8 hours a day, is roughly $140 a day. It is $140 a day.
Yeah.
Which I think comes down to about $2,800 a month.
Yeah.
If you work a 5-day week, that is, because you make $700 a week, right? Then you've got health surcharge and NIS, so you're taking home approximately $2,644, and is it 40 cents or 60 cents per math? Somewhere around there.
Once you're cutting into that small of a number,
$2,644, right? Because you're not going to pay tax on that, but you still have to pay NIS and health surcharge, right? And it is extremely difficult for anyone in TNT to live on minimum wage right now, especially on $2,644 a month. Because many a times, if you do your grocery shopping and you get the very basic items for a week, let's just say a week, very basic items just for about a week, that's about $500 at least minimum that you're paying at the grocery there. And it's tragic that for a country that has benefited from so much in terms of wealth, that be the case in 2023. Yes. The flip side to this entire situation is that given our current circumstances and given the inflationary pressures globally that obviously will impact Trinidad and Tobago, given that we import the majority of our food that we consume, and that's just one item, increasing the minimum wage now, especially for businesses that are still recovering from COVID-19. Not all businesses will recover at the same rate. And not all businesses actually had to close down during the COVID-19 pandemic. They're going to pass on that cost to the consumer, but to the minimum wage. So this is the thing, you need to have a deeper analysis. We can have this conversation right now and we can look at both sides, and we're not actually going to come to an agreement because it is so difficult when you take a look at both sides. Do you want the cost to be passed on to the consumer and prices increase?
Outside of security guards, what else uses the minimum wage? Because all of the I have literally not heard of jobs. Even a day laborer, right? Who is not, we're not talking about like a skilled tradesman who is a plumber that's going to install all the plumbing into your 5-bedroom house, or a skilled electrician who's going to install all the wiring to your compound, right? Even a day laborer, I think, starts off at like $200 a day, sometimes $300 a day. That's above minimum wage.
Well, so I think between $300 and $400 is like the foreman, but yeah, day labor is about $200
right.
a day.
So I'm trying to figure out what, because maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure a lot of jobs, we're looking at a starting point at like 6, which is twice as much as the minimum wage.
So you made a good point. The minimum wage, what it really is supposed to do, it is supposed to be the very, very basic that an employer should pay the employee.
Right.
Right? Per hour.
Right.
Per hour's work. So it doesn't look at per day or per month. It looks at per hour's work. That's supposed to be very basic. And there are some jobs out there that actually still utilize the minimum wage as their argument. However, increasing the minimum wage is still going to have an impact. Because even if people are not making $17.50 an hour now, let's just say they're making $20 an hour instead, right? Then if the minimum wage increases to $22, that's still an increase on the business itself. They still have to have more output. And given all the demands and the expenses associated with conducting business now in TNT, it's still going to lead to other pressures.
The flip side is, I can't see how $17.50 is a livable wage unless, if we're talking about I'm out of school and I'm like, just like a stock boy as a 18-year-old or something like that, right? If it's like that kind of entry-level job, maybe. But I'm really struggling with regards to saying, well, this is acceptable, because to me, a good portion of the entry-level jobs in the country is already ahead of this.
Well, you see, the thing is, there is a minimum wage and then there's a livable minimum wage. What our minimum wage also takes into account are the other benefits that are available to those in Trinidad. So in other words, transfers and subsidies. Simply put it, we have healthcare that is provided at the cost of the state.
Yeah,
now,
but even with that,
you pay a health surcharge.
Right, but even with that, we're watching food inflation continuing, and it's affecting most people except potentially the upper crust of society, right? At one point, I just refused, and I would have even shouted at my mother if she even dared to buy sweet peppers, because that's just ridiculous in price. My brother said one day he just left tomatoes. There's a whole shelf of tomatoes. The vegetable market was selling out of everything else. Nobody wanted to touch the tomatoes, right? So in the face of that, I do wonder, how is this? And the thing is, I understand, again, the cries for, oh, inflation could happen if we increase the minimum wage. But the minimum wage is so small, I actually have a hard time believing that we would see significant inflation, it's only if, because the minimum wage goes up, if for whatever reason, higher salaries that are tied contractually to the minimum wage also goes up. I actually think we won't see as much inflation as a lot of these economics and chambers think. I
think the minimum wage currently, as I was saying, takes into account certain subsidies, transfers. Yes, you've got health. To a certain degree, you've got education that's free. Though you still have to buy education supplies and textbooks. And
give donations and then pay for lessons if you actually want an education.
So there are some things that are considered. But again, I will agree with you on the notion that it is not a livable minimum wage. But this is why the argument is there needs to be strong analysis. Whilst I'm firmly of the position that it is extremely difficult for any person to live on $2,644 a month, I also believe that we cannot rush into making such decisions. Now, the Minister has indicated that for the last 3 weeks, Cabinet has been deliberating this, and he expects a final decision to be made within 2 weeks' time. Now, although the final decision may be made in 2 weeks' time, nothing will be read until most likely October in the budget.
Right.
That is most likely when you hear it. He is stating it now because, and he has not promised a drastic increase. He hasn't promised an increase either. Just bear that in mind.
Yes.
Right? But he's stating that now because, let's be honest with you, it's brought up in the public domain and it is election time as well. But I would suspect that you would not necessarily hear anything until October. And you might not actually see anything being fully implemented until January the 1st, as is the case most things stated in our budget.
To some extent, it gives businesses a chance to compensate. I just question, and I think until somebody, if an economist wants to say it could cause inflation, granted, if you increase the minimum wage by some ridiculous amount, you go to like $50 an hour, then that's going to cause something.
That's impossible. Even if you go to $30 an hour, it's going to be greedy, because this $30 an hour is what the unions are asking for.
$30 an hour is still under about $5,000 a month.
But the thing is, which is better than the $2,644?
Right. I don't think that even that. I'm actually questioning really and truly how much on a practical level inflation will we see.
Sean, you will be incredibly surprised as to the salaries.
The amount of people that...
Yeah, and the salaries that they are surviving on. Though they're not thriving. And it's not to say that, you know, they're surviving, but they're making work because they don't have a choice.
Here's the thing. I firmly believe that a minimum wage should not be to allow you to provide for a family of four. That's not what a minimum wage should be. It should allow you to survive relatively decently, not necessarily in luxury, but, you know, you're not like struggling and stressed out as an individual.
I think that is another topic in the sense that, and I don't want to get too caught up in that because believe you me, I can.
The problem is that matters in the States.
No.
They went with the former.
I understand.
And the math comes out more difficult.
My thing is, you know, you can't go back on the past. But if you take a look at what's happening now, and if you take a look about your living conditions as an individual, if you cannot look after yourself, do not do an injustice by bringing a child into this world.
Yeah, but I mean, society is replete with examples of people not thinking.
I'm not trying to be impolite in any way.
I
think people need to understand
that on a macro level, that's just our truth.
A child is an absolutely beautiful thing. It's a gift. However, it's also a very expensive gift. And a lot goes in, a lot of responsibility goes in. So if you are earning $20 an hour, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a child, but I'm also saying that it is extremely difficult for you to look after yourself. Why is it that you have people who are working for minimum wage or just a bit more than minimum wage, but yet you have multiple children, or you continue to get pregnant, or you are getting...
Some cases
so
you have
again,
yes.
I'm not trying to be impolite, unkind, or disrespectful, but I'm also trying to tell people you have to be a bit sensible.
So here's another question. Should we potentially... Because grants also provide for inflation, because at the end of the day, it's putting money out into the hands of the population. Should the system be rebalanced around less grants and maybe a more generally robust wage structure that will see some increase to the minimum wage? Because I actually think the answer to that is yes. Part of the problem, at least in some countries, I'm not sure if it's here, You could keep having kids even though you can't afford to sustain yourself because you will get social help for each child that you have, which just encourages you to have more and more children potentially.
I think it goes both hand in hand. There are two things. One, you need to look at areas of which you can improve efficiency. For example, even clearing goods at the port.
Yeah.
When you have containers sitting on the port and the costs are accumulating on a daily basis, having those containers sitting there, that cost is then passed on to the consumer. So you have to bear that in mind as well. Two, you mentioned grants. The thing is, you can't just remove grants like that, and no government will dare touch the grant system by removing it. However, you can have a more robust grant system in which you have measures in place to constantly monitor those who are receiving grants to ensure that those who are very much in need of it.
Given the fact that we have seen so many cases where the government owes money to various creditors, including TNTech, including contractors for the police service, for EFCL, and Lord knows who else. Could we really afford to keep some of these grants? Increasing the minimum wage kind of passes the buck on to other employers, but it potentially will also cause some government employees to
We are also in a position where we cannot afford to get rid of it. That is a very difficult thing given with social services now. Because of the current climate, financial climate and economic climate that we're in, we can't get rid of those grants. And this is why I'm saying that you need a more stringent system involved. I've constantly referred to on this particular platform one gentleman who I often seen, very well built, very healthy looking, by no means looks ill at all. Unfortunately, some accident happened where he lost the tip of his big toe. But he's standing outside the bank saying that how his toe is sick, and he's constantly begging those who are going into the ATM and coming out. Right? And the thing is, I find it amazing. You see him eating all the time. You see him...
he looks like a professional.
And yes, a professional con, if you'd like to put it that way. But he makes his way across Trinidad because I've seen him in many places.
He might actually have a car.
The thing is, no, I've seen this as a way strapped. But the point is, he's the very first person outside the bank when it is going to collect. I think is it the bank? No, it's social services.
Right.
When he's going to the social services office, where he's going to collect. Because I've seen it. I've seen it.
I have heard a story in the States where a beggar was caught by someone that he begged money from earlier that day in a high-end restaurant driving a Mercedes.
But my thing is,
you never know.
You have that happening in TNT.
Yes.
You need to have more, and that's just one example. There may be more. I've seen another gentleman who is walking with a cane all the time. He then went, and this I witnessed it because I've seen it all the time. He then walked in to a supermarket. He bought a bottle of, I can't remember if it was some tonic wine or something like that. He's drinking it. He walks out of the supermarket with his cane swinging on his hand, drinking the alcohol, walking down the street. The next day you see him walking with a cane again because he's got to line up outside social services to collect his grant. But you see that taking place in TNT. So if we have a more robust system which ensures that people who are receiving grants are those that are actually in need of it, you're going to help a lot. You're going to help the situation a lot.
All right, look, let's take a break. Although I just like to close by pointing out Keaton's suggestion of making the system more efficient. And there's a lot of excess fat in our public service.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
In our public service, in our, Defense Force, Coast Guard, Customs, and a lot of inefficiencies. As well as just laziness. That if we got rid of that, I don't know how much money we would save, but since labor cost tends to be 70% of any organization's costs, I think it could be considerable. Bear that in mind when we say that places like Wassa are bloated. Folks, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll finish off the daily review and get into further topics for the day. Stay tuned on Talking Point on WSN, your content capital. We'll be right back.
We exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain. And it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes anytime KFC time. KFC, It's finger licking good.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
August 14th, local government election night returns. Understand what's happening in your community. WESN presents our special election coverage with a panel of trusted citizens and context you will not get elsewhere. Special coverage begins from 7 p.m. on the premier platform for Caribbean content, WESN.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Please help me help you. Remember, elections have consequences. Make the right choice.
Welcome back to Talking About. Just a couple of more stories I want to get through for the morning before we get into the big talk. First of all, Keaton, something happened. Interesting news from the ministry. They went in, seized expired and unregistered drugs. And while it doesn't seem as though that they seized a lot, 500,000, 0.5 million is what the report says. I do wonder, because first of all, I don't think they went into every pharmacy in the country. And I do wonder to what extent do we have a wider issue with unregistered, to a less extent expired, but unregistered drugs in the country. Because I don't know about you, but it seems as though not every prescription drug that is sold over a counter is actually handed out by a pharmacist.
Well, yeah, because you've got over-the-counter drugs.
No, prescription. I said prescription.
Oh, okay,
and does not seem to have a, doctor's prescription written out to get it.
I actually don't know about that. I would hope.
You would hope, I know.
I would hope.
I have heard of friends, I have heard of family members, yeah, just get an antibiotic.
Listen.
It's like those things are not over-the-counter drugs. I don't think there's any antibiotic in the world. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's no antibiotic in the world that's an over-the-counter drug.
Not all thieves carry guns. Some of them probably carry medicine bottles.
So,
and I use that too because I've known for quite some time now that there are pharmacies across Trinidad who are doing injustices. For example, one of the bigger things is pharmacies. Do you know that with, like, for example, cough syrups, you used to get these plastic cups, right, that you measure the cups in.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Right, so there's some pharmacies that are actually now taking the cups out of the actual packaging and selling it for $1.
Those rat bastards.
Right? They are actually doing that now.
For $1?
For $1, right?
You're sure it's not the brand not providing it?
No.
You're very safe?
I'm very safe.
Oh, okay.
And then you've also got pharmacies, happens all around, that are opening containers and medicine bottles or vitamin bottles, and they shouldn't actually be doing it.
Yes.
And they're actually taking from them and package them and send them separately.
Yes.
Right? But that's happening all over. Anyway, with regards to this unregistered or expired drug medication, let me use that word, medication, pharmaceuticals. The first thing that came to my mind is, one, how are these unregistered drugs getting into the country? Right? Everything should pass through the Food and Drug Division's inspection. But that does not happen.
I think the answer has something to do with the other unregistered drugs, aka cocaine.
I was just about to say that it wouldn't surprise me anymore that anything gets into shores, because a lot of unregistered, illegal, explicit substances or devices pass through. But anyway, whatever. The second thing is that what one former pharmaceutical board president brought up was that there isn't a list of registered drugs or unregistered drugs that are made available to all pharmacies. Now, that was counteracted by the Minister of Health, Terence Yalçin, who indicated that it is available, it's gazetted, that list,
right,
but it's also available online. Now, what the former president of the pharmacy board was saying is, it is archaic, it is old. The list is actually old. I am just here in TNT saying that, okay, we've got all these things, they need to, I don't know what's the relationship between the Pharmacy Board of Trinidad and Tobago and the Minister of Health. I know that there was even infighting within the Pharmacy Board, and I don't know if they've been able to sort that out. But pharmacy owners need to be a lot more responsible. And I would agree with the Food and Drug Administration actually carrying out these things on all pharmacies.
Yes.
Not select. And I hope it's not select. I really hope it's not select. On all pharmacies, because you have a lot of just... It's the drugs that you're not being prescribed that you're getting. You're getting the alternatives. You're getting the generics. And that shouldn't be the case.
Now,
and by the way, there are some pharmacists who are saying this is the generic version, but it's just as good as. It's just as good as. But this is not what is prescribed to me.
So the thing is, I have had a situation where for my apnea, I was prescribed by a doctor, by an ENT, nasal spray to try to open up the airways because I have significant blockage, right? And he was the one that said, well, okay, this is the brand name one, this is the generic one, and he was the one that said it is just as good, right? But I do see that point there. The last thing that you said there, when a pharmacist now is giving medical advice, right, that the doctor did not give. Granted, doctors are not perfect, I understand that, but on some level, that makes me feel very uncomfortable.
So my next two questions are, generally speaking here in TNT, are pharmacies unregulated? Is it that
on a practical level?
Yeah,
because I'm sure officially they're supposed to be.
Once you have a pharmacist who is registered with the Pharmacy Board of TNT, can anyone open up a pharmacy? Right, so there's just basically unregulated. And two...
Well, I think you just need one.
I've been hearing for quite some time, and this has been disputed strongly by the Ministry of Health, but I heard from patients that the drugs that they are being prescribed by doctors, which are supposed to fall under CDAP, right, the Communicable Drug Assistance Program, something to that effect, those drugs are not available. They're actually not available. They're not getting what is being prescribed by doctors. So is that also a huge issue where there's a great shortage of medication here in TNT? Medication that is necessary, medication of which is being prescribed, but you cannot get it. It's not made available for whatever reason. So there is no choice but to look at alternatives.
And we know two things. We know that there have been shortages. You've mentioned it a couple of times throughout Talking Point. And I know even before COVID, there were situations with health centers being short of supplies and potentially drugs. So while we don't necessarily know to what extent that's happening, I would think it's reasonable for us to suspect shortages are just going to happen. Now, sometimes, of course, with regards to how government services work, you have a shortage and then they get an influx of cash, they kind of get more supplies. It's not necessarily going to be a permanent thing, but I think for something like medication, if you have hiccups in your supply chain, that's bad enough.
I think I made a slight error on my part. It's not communicable disease, it's chronic disease assistance program.
Okay.
But anyway, we can move on.
To be fair, I did not think it was a mistake. So you did out yourself there. So moving on to the election, political analysts, I believe it was two different political analysts made this comment. Derek Ramsey-Jew and Vishnu Raghunath. They said that they're looking at the trade unions and they're not really seeing them have an impact on this election. And I find it interesting, and I do wonder, is it that the song and dance of the unions have they finally kind of just one-dimensional dance themselves into irrelevancy because they're not really advancing anything I would consider to be significant as a cause. They're just saying more money, more money, more money, more money. More money, more money, more money, more money. It's the same cries all the time, and at some point when the rest of the country is like, we need more money, too, so we don't really care about you and your needs for more money because we poor just like you.
And
it's sad because our labor movement is one of the big things for a democratic country.
Forgive me, and when you call in at 9:05, correct me. Has the labor movement, at least within the last 20 years, had any influence on an election?
I think to some extent, yes.
You think so?
Yeah, because of the size of their members.
I think it's been waning. Because you can you can preach to your members all you want. Now you've had Mr. Jackson appearing on the UNC platform, only to then go and say, and they are campaigning with the United National Congress.
Well, a subset of,
right?
Yeah.
Only for them to say, we're supporting the MSG. Now, you can tell that to your members all that you want, you know. On election day, you don't know who your members are voting for. So you can say, well, we as union, we're going to stand behind the MSG. If that was the case, given the union and their support or the number of their members, then the MSG would have great influence.
I think the MSJ only has a limited number of candidates.
They've got 3.
Yeah, so...
But I'm talking about in the past and even now. So let's see what happens there. You never know. But at the end of the day, you can preach to your members all you want. They're not necessarily going to vote for any one political party who the union, you know, prescribes or says they're supporting. I think that unions, the strength or the influence of the unions are waning, and it's been waning for some time. I do not think they have that strong position that they once did. And I think to a certain extent, even members of the public, members of the citizenry, have grown a bit frustrated with the rhetoric and the stance that's being brought forward by union members. Well, not say union members, but even leaders within the unions.
Well, I mean, Watson Duke did not help the case for the PSA, and look what happened to Petrochin with those negotiations. But Kamala said last night, the opposition leader, at the Monday night rallies that the UNC normally has, I caught a little bit of it. She did call out the 4%, especially with regards to the protective services. And I think she called it evil, and she promised to give better or greater increases. Again, this is a local government election. These sort of campaign promises have no bearing on this election. But she mentioned it at the meeting last night, basically saying that, you know, a UNC administration will give a higher raise. But here's the thing, and this is why potentially the unions are not going all in with the opposition parties. And I actually could appreciate that. I don't know if the UNC gets into power in the next general election, if they could have greater increases. Somehow just manifest money, you know, out of thin air to give everybody a wage increase. Because if you do it for some, you know, the rest are going to say, what about us?
So here's my thing. These promises that the opposition leader is making, she's making promises. She's not telling me how they're going to go about doing it. So,
I mean, do they ever?
You can say whatever you'd like to on a political platform, and a sound-minded individual will be like, yes, okay, that sounds all well and good. How are we going to achieve this? Because any decision that you make are going to have knock-on effects. What are you going to do to ensure that those knock-on effects are minimum in terms of their negative impact? So, I don't know how the opposition leader, she will clearly knock it. She will clearly, you know, take the position because she's in opposition. However, how it is that you're saying you're going to, you know, put more on the table, where we're getting that money from, precisely what are the areas that you're going to invest in that are going to have such great returns, and then beyond that, how are you going to minimize the negative effects as mentioned previously? It is the same thing, not to get too carried away with regards to FULs. I'm an individual that is of the firm belief that people should have the right and the ability to protect themselves. But my local government councillor
can't
get me an FUL.
Yeah. Well, okay, hold up. There's more on that. I want to save that topic for after the break. But Yes, folks. So we'll just wrap things up there. When we return, get further into the comments, because the Prime Minister made some comments at his discussion with the public, aka discussion with PNM supporters, and the opposition leader, she made some comments with regards to the government's handling of national security. Ironically, they echoed each other quite a bit with regards to the concepts that they were trying to apply to each other. So stay tuned, we'll get into that after this.
August 14th, local government election night returns. Understand what's happening in your community. WESN presents our special election coverage with a panel of trusted citizens and context you will not get elsewhere. Special coverage begins from 7 p.m. on the premier platform for Caribbean content, WESN.
This city can't hold me, my vibe's too high, and my heart it told me jump right now, you will touch the sky. Feel my love unfolding like a laughing flame. All who did not know me when not done, they gon' know the name. Million people coming down, dancing to a song. Love is life and life is love, blessings from above. Can you feel the love that's in the air? Well, if you feel it, let me hear you say, dancing, moving, moving everywhere. If you feel it, let me hear you say, na 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 na, eh na 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 na.
When I lost them, can't find my way. Is your love help me elevate? And when they try to block, I still come again. It's the way you lift me up. I could never give it up, no.
This is the way we celebrate independence. This is how it should be done. An event like this brings everybody out. All different race, creed, everything. This is our country. And how is the best way to celebrate our independence? With our national anthem. The vision I had 6 years ago, trying to make people happy. We started this event not to stop. This event must continue. And at independence, we could celebrate it together as a country. Even though the hard things, the struggles, we will always remain together as one people. Thank you.
Give me this energy. You give me that energy. Can you feel this energy? With the rhythm beating inside of my soul. This energy. You give me that energy. We feeling this energy. With the rhythm beating inside our way.
Take me to the river, take me to the sea. Wash over me music, wash over me. Take me to the river, take me to the river. Wash over me music, wash over me.
And of course, the very said people in the parliament where the parliamentarians, where the government is in the majority and they are in a strong minority, the parliamentarians are to take action in doing certain things to suppress the criminal element. Ask yourself when you see them on platform and hear them talking loudly, what was your position in the parliament on passing legislation to control the criminal element? On every occasion, it's the rights of the criminals that they support. No, 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 no to everything. On one occasion, the biggest problem in the country today with crime and criminality and guns and association is gang activity. Criminal action by gangs and action by gangs against gangs, revenge killings and management of turf and so on. That is the bulk of the crime in this country, the violent crime. So we come to the parliament with an anti-gang bill to pass into an anti-gang law. When they were in government, we supported it as an opposition. But it had a sunset clause that it would not stay in power for all times. It has to come back to the parliament to be refreshed and to be reauthorized the minute they come out of office. And we bring the anti-gang legislation back to parliament. They said no, on the grounds that it is not working. So while anti-gang legislation is not working, so they can't vote against it, they want to give everybody a gun. And of course, when they did not vote for the law, and you, the people, cried out against their behavior, what happened? When they saw the reaction of the population for their irresponsible conduct, they then said, bring it back to the parliament and we'll vote for it. Amend the standing orders in the parliament, adjourn the standing orders, and bring it back immediately. And of course, since they had a change of heart, we went back to the parliament with it. You all forget that? We went back to the parliament with the bill that they didn't vote for a few weeks before. And they still wouldn't vote for it as it was drafted. They took out, we're not voting for that. They weakened the law, and we took what we could get from them. They eventually voted for something after they weakened it. Who benefited from that? Let me ask you a question. Who benefited from that kind of behavior? Every single law we've gone to parliament with to fight crime, whether it's violent crime or white-collar crime, they oppose it. A simple law like collecting taxes and regulating gambling, a law which they brought to the parliament. Their own bill to regulate gambling. Because they lost office, they refused to support it. We had to amend it in a way that it could be passed with our majority, because they didn't want a stronger law using their majority. These are the same people who today tell you that they are for the society and they will give you all these things they offered you, when in fact when they had an opportunity to vote to suppress the criminal element, they voted against it. You know how much trouble we had in the parliament to get them to not block child marriage? They were so against the bill, they brought 2 experts on child marriage in the parliament to talk in favor of keeping it. You know what the latest parliamentarians in the parliament today, you know what the latest success is? Getting bail for murderers. In this scenario, that is their priority. Murderers can now get bail in Trinidad and Tobago because it's their right. The law permits it. They are advocating it. It's out there. Are you any better off with more murderers outside or inside?
Now, to be fair to the Prime Minister, Acting SP Christopher Arun, he did indicate that gangs more or less is the big driving force, or at least a big driving force of crime in the nation. And ironically, I found it ironic, the opposition leader last night on her Monday night broadcast basically said something similar to what the Prime Minister just said. She called out the government for not supporting Stand Your Ground and saying that essentially the government wants to protect home invaders by limiting or making it more difficult for citizens to defend themselves. That's the implication that her words carried. I find it interesting in the sense that one could argue both are being hypocritical. Now, with regards to the criticisms for the government's moves with the anti-gang legislation and not agreeing with the opposition on bail, I actually have concerns about that. Because curtailing freedoms of people that are not convicted, that should not be something that we do easily. The flip side is I also have concerns about stand your ground, right? So one could argue, at least I'm being consistent, Keaton, because according to both the opposition and the government, I am very pro-criminal and I want to protect them from certain things. But the flip side is rights are rights for a reason and they should not be discarded easily.
No, I remember the strong conversation surrounding the sunset clause for the bail amendment bill last year. I remember that conversation, and the arguments being put forward is that restricting bail that are available to those for certain offences in itself was very harsh. Mm-hmm. Those were some of the arguments that were being put forward. And they also said it was quite oppressive. And now the government was pushing forward with it, but there was no support from the opposition because the opposition, I think, wanted a sunset clause in it and so on and so forth. We don't have to get back into that. Mm-hmm. The thing is that there are laws that already exist. Right? I'm speaking to the Prime Minister now because the opposition leader, again, is making so many promises and saying so many things, and I still don't know how she's going to implement any of these things, or how she's going to go about getting it done, especially in a local government election. But the Prime Minister last night, and I even followed him on Saturday, all right? And I think that clip is from Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, yes. Right? I thought he was actually really good on Saturday. I thought he was very good on Saturday. I was surprised in a good sense. Conversation with the Prime Minister, he's been doing very well. But sometimes he gets caught up in it and he tends to go off. And you have to remind the Prime Minister that he is the same individual that says if government cannot deal with crime, mm-hmm. right, or if the government make excuses, then the government themselves are part of the problem. So we are speaking about legislation, and you can pass legislation, but the legislation is not being enforced. So the government now has to ask themselves, what is it that is going wrong where it's not being enforced? So the government could blame the opposition a lot for the crime situation in TNT. The point is they're the ones that are in power, and even if they couldn't get through with that particular piece of legislation, the existing legislation is not being forced. Would this piece of legislation had a great impact? I don't think so. I really don't think so. So to go on and on about it at this point in time, yes, we are on a campaign. Yes, he's speaking against the opposition. But what I would prefer in his position is to know, as Prime Minister, yes, I recognize all of this is turf war. A lot of it is gang versus gang. Okay, Prime Minister, if we recognize that, what is now being done to ensure that this level of criminal activity is minimalized and then eradicated?
Well, I hate to say this, but I think the political class has been sucked, because I believe it legitimately, at least to some extent, starts from the voters. That's what they are telling, because I have seen UNC candidates speak about it. I have seen PNM supporters question the Prime Minister about it, even though the moderator is trying to say we're here for local government elections. The first time especially, right? I think the second time they more or less gave in and said, well, we're here to talk about whatever you want to talk about. But the first time they started off saying we're here for local government elections, and they still wanted to speak about crime. So I understand that it's something important to the country, and the politicians have allowed the voting populace to lose sight of what these elections are supposed to be about, and we have more or less started the campaigning for the next general. This is not just a dress rehearsal like in past. This is a full-out opening night of I think, general elections campaigning. My thing is this, and it goes to what you said with regards to the legislation that the government is putting forward, and I think that also you look at the stand your ground legislation. I think these things are trying to compensate for deficiencies, for the real problems in the criminal justice system, and the compensation is not necessarily going to work. I think the issue with granting murderers bail, I think stems from the fact that how long do people get stuck on remand waiting for their trial to go forth? If trials were done in a timely manner, then not granting bail to murderers would not be as big of an issue if they're essentially stuck without bail for 2 years or something like that, maybe even 5 years,
but you know
right?
what the purpose of bail is, right?
Well, you could have your freedom while waiting on trial because technically you're not not guilty.
Bail is one. It helps
to ensure that you come to trial.
It helps you, yeah, exactly, to ensure that you show up at court. That's what bail basically is, right? However, the thing is, it also helps the system in terms of remand, right?
Well, and
it also helps the cost of the state. But you also have a big risk that even though you're out on bail,
here's the thing:
bail does not mean that you're going to stop a life of crime or a life of being violent.
Here's the thing. I have been told that each court, like each individual court, has thousands upon thousands of cases every year. And when you multiply, you could get, just in Port of Spain alone, you could get hundreds of thousands of cases, right, every year. And what was pointed out to me is, with hundreds of thousands every year, it's not as though we have hundreds of thousands of criminals. So we have a lot of repeat offenders. So when law enforcement officials and members of the National Security Council are looking at murderers who are potentially repeat offenders, I could understand, right, not necessarily wanting to give murderers or accused murderers bail, especially, and this is maybe where information disservice is happening. When people are suspected of multiple murders, I don't know if they should get bail. Because at that point, that's a risk to say, oh yeah, we suspect you murdered 4 people in 4 separate occasions, but we're going to give you bail set at $100,000. Oh, you can make bail? Okay, well, enjoy. Because think about it in the reverse. The trial is going to take so long, for all intents and purposes, they're free from that murder for 10 years, 15 years. And then that's if you could get a conviction at the end of the day. So it's a rock and a hard place, I understand that, but I think giving murderers bail, having this stand your ground proposition is trying to make up, because we have real deficiencies, particularly with the murder rate, and it's not really going to compensate and solve the problem. It's just going to be a minor band-aid. Look, you question with regards to FULs. The TTPS probably does not, unless you change the process completely, the TTPS probably does not have the manpower to process all the FULs the opposition wants to give out. So then now, you're either going to have to pay for extra duty, and then the FULs, it's going to go from a bribe to an actual legitimate cost if you have to pay for extra duty. Or you're just going to have the haves and the have-nots all over again. You're going to have a waiting list a mile long. It's going to take you years just to get consideration for an FUL. Then you have to go through the process of actually an officer going over your paperwork and investigating you to get the FUL. And it might cost more than the gun itself if they have to pay for extra time to get the backlog done. And then you have to actually buy the bloody gun, right?
You know, you give me a headache just actually thinking about it. But anyway, listen, we've got to break for news on the hour, but I think when we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. You can share your thoughts and opinions with us. And contrary to the conversation this morning, you can even speak to the hypocrisy that Sean is alluding to. But there are other stories of which we were able to touch on, inclusive of the minimum wage and the support or the strength of unions, especially when it comes to elections and politicking. Drugs, when I say drugs, I mean pharmaceuticals, those that are unregistered, those that are expired, or even the availability of prescribed drugs that are available or not available, that is, through the CDAC program here in TNT. You can speak to that as well. By gosh, what's the weather like outside? We're actually in studio right now with the air conditioning, so we are wondering whether or not it's another scorcher today. Let us know right after this.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Sierra Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Police examining social media posts showing a gun target at the heart of the Prime Minister. Special voting begins for over 13,000 special voters for local government elections. Drone operation unearthed among maximum security prisoners. Regionally, Antiguan mother and daughter win Virgin Galactic trip to space. Now for the details. Police are presently examining a social media post showing a gun target at the heart of the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley. The 12-second video is captioned, "Load the Matic and empty the clip on them, August 14th. Local government elections will be held on August 14th. In the video, opposition leader Kalma Prasad Bisasa appears in a box on the top left of the screen on the political platform saying, "We have to load up this Matic. We have to pull it back. You have to lock it again, then lock it again." There are 13,284 special electors eligible to begin voting today for the local government elections, according to the EBC. The EBC says these polling stations will operate from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. until Sunday, August 13th. Additional polling stations have also been established by the EBC and will operate from Tuesday 8th to Thursday 10th August 2023 from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Officials assigned to investigate incidents of unmanned drones appearing in and around the nation's prisons believe they have unearthed a widespread network of criminal figures using the devices to not only smuggle contraband but monitor the layout of the facilities. According to a news report, a document purported to originate from one of the investigating prison officers has surfaced on social media and alleged that at least 4 groups of prisoners have been implicated in the use of drones. One of the groups involves a high-ranking underworld figure whose brother is believed to be the pilot of the drones. The use of the drones in transporting drugs, weapons, cell phones, and other restricted materials to inmates has assumed greater focus in recent times, as the devices have been spotted at several prisons across TNT. But further disturbing is the allegations that the devices may be used by inmates themselves to explore the layout of cell blocks at night and day. The document adds that police have been notified, but officers are still awaiting further instructions on what will be done in response. Regionally, an 18-year-old Aberdeen University student and her mother will travel to space later this week after winning a place on Virgin Galactic's second commercial flight in a prize draw. Anastasia Myers and her mum, Keisha Skarhaf, will be the first mother and daughter to go to space. They will also be the first people from the Caribbean to make the journey. The pair will take off from New Mexico on Thursday. Keisha was also traveling to the UK to sort out her daughter's visa when she entered the competition. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sierra Ali. Thanks for watching.
August 14th, local government election night returns. Understand what's happening in your community. WESN presents our special election coverage with a panel of trusted citizens and context you will not get elsewhere. Special coverage begins from 7 p.m. on the premier platform for Caribbean content, WESN.
Still waiting for that weather update. Actually, I didn't take the opportunity to check what it's like outside. I know that we are expecting some rain either later on today and during the course of the week, given that there is a system
the week, I read the week.
Out in the Atlantic. Well, from what I saw this morning on my journey to WESN, there was some clouds. I don't know if that's cleared up and if it's just another day of frying plantains. Yes, we are the plantains. But
speak for yourself. I'm not a plantain.
Anyway, 628-4578, 623-9376. Those are the numbers you can call in and make your contribution to Talking Point. Share with us your thoughts and opinions on a number of topics that are making the news today and, of course, over the course of the last couple of weeks and in the weeks to come. Speak to us on the thoughts of the minimum wage and what the Minister of Labour is saying that in 2 weeks' time, hopefully a final decision should be made with regard to minimum wage. There's also this situation with regard to pharmacies and drugs that have been expired or unregistered that were confiscated.
There's something else I want to speak about with regards to pharmacies if we have time, but we do have a caller from Digicel. Good morning, caller.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Yes, morning.
You're on the air, go ahead.
All right. First of all, let's talk about Kamala and what she's saying that cannot be achieved with the election, Mr. Small. I think what you're not understanding is that she is not saying that these things are going to be done with the local government election. What she is doing, she's signaling the country that as a prelude to getting into government, the local government results will indicate where they stand. And if they stand in a good position, these are some of the things that they will do. It is not that they are going to do those things through local government. That's the first thing, right?
Go on, I'm listening to you.
The next thing is, with so much of things you all talk about this morning, I'm beginning to forget now.
We've got minimum wage. We've got...
minimum wage.
Yeah.
You ever try to get a carpenter, a mason, a steel bender, and a laborer to do some work around your house? To do some work or to cut your lawn? When the yard man come and he watch your lawn, that I want $800 for that.
Yeah.
And then you tell him to do the other piece, you want $600.
Yeah.
And you're giving him a rider more, you're giving him a push more, you're giving him a rake, you're giving him gas, you're giving him nylon for the weed eater, and you're giving him a weed. He ain't coming in, he just coming with himself, right? And he might have to take up some debris and grass to throw away, right? So
you've got
minimum wage doesn't apply there.
Yes.
Right? The carpenters and the carpenter minimum wage, they don't work for less than $400 a day. The mason don't work for less than a laborer doesn't work for less than $300 a day. Otherwise, you're not going to get good people to do your work. Right? That is the second thing. So minimum wage, that only applies in very like gas station, pump attendants. And
all right, caller, quickly.
Right. What's the next thing you all were talking about?
Well, caller, we might have to cut you there because we have another caller waiting. So
okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I will respond to the first thing. We don't disagree with you, but I'll respond to that.
I would like to respond to the first thing as well. Good morning, caller from Digicel.
Good morning, Mr. Shah and Sean.
Good morning.
I think short, bowling, because I want to raise an issue that I think is under the radar.
Yes.
In one of the Prime Minister's conversation, he alluded to the fact that the CLICO investigation is costing, and somebody submitting a $34 million, I think in the DB office, for him to pay, and he balked at that. A week ago or 2 weeks ago, there was a judgment in the court that there were a fraudulent transaction in CLICO with respect to the Proman shares. I'm sure you all read the newspaper.
Yes. Well,
that
it's
tells
CLICO
me,
Energy shares.
Right. That tells me there is something in the CLICO investigation that has to continue. The PIACO take 20 years. It's only 7 years with the CLICO now, since the Coleman report. So the Prime Minister has to let it. He cannot come and want to derail it, because I believe he's protecting certain individuals, because the first one who cleared his own name was our former Attorney General. He said there's nothing for him to answer. But I want to drum the river and hope the population will connect this. You remember there were some shares, sorry, not shares, an investment in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. We lose $1 billion. Who was the manager of that? He was a former central bank governor, and he's the same player. and I'm going to jump back over the river again on the other side, where that investment was made. Everybody's silent on it.
Yeah.
Is it related to any investment locally on a company that owns Guardian Life?
This is the recent law says, correct?
That is the question I want transparency is. That is what I want the Prime Minister and them to understand. We're hearing all about it. We are questioning if there is an issue and another Clico to come in to us based on another large regional conglomerate. And it's the same players. I want to know what has happened with the Clico investigation by the DPP.
Right,
because we had a pin that the Prime Minister chaired. There were
thank you.
104
Let's try and respond to you.
Go on, have a
wait, caller. You're speaking about the losses in the HSF recently at the start of the year, correct?
Right,
from last year, from the end of last year.
Right.
Okay.
And we're not too sure where the investment is. It was made for in a local.
Okay. All right, caller. I'll try to respond to that because I do have some thoughts on that, but we do have another caller. Thank you. We have a caller from Shogunas. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Sorry for calling back again. Very quickly. In addition to the money that is being spent in the national budget, right? How much money has been spent off budget by cabinet just sitting down in Whitehall and saying, we approve that, go ahead, spend that money. And what has it been spent on? So a new government coming into office could say that, look, we're not going to spend money like that, right? So that we could have out of that 10 or 12 billion dollars that is spent off budget, we could have about $2 billion to pay for wages and whatever for the increase in wages and to increase salaries and so, because nobody knows what is spent off budget, how much is spent, and what is it spent on, right? You're small, you're looking like you're shocked. You don't know what.
No. I'm just trying to figure out how that works.
Off budget is where you have the national budget,
yes,
and off budget spending is where cabinet go in Whitehall and they sit down in a room and with the Prime Minister they agree to spend that money on something. They may say we want to buy 3 or 4 vessels, ships, right? And
right.
They just buy it and bring it. 2 for Coast Guard, 2 for ferry service, and that's $4 billion, right? They may say we want to build an airport, $1 billion right there. Right? Yeah, like you want me to...
All right, caller, thanks. No. Give us an opportunity to respond
to
you.
But I don't know. Do we have another caller?
No, we don't. So,
okay.
I don't know if you'd like to go first, if you know, but...
go ahead, I need to, there's too many...
Sure. So, the caller I believe the callers from Shogunas, I thought they were from Digicel initially, who made the point about Kamala Prasad-Bisessa and what she's stating on the campaign trail. I wouldn't argue against the fact that people are alluding that this election is important leading up to the next general election. However, these promises should not be made on a local government election platform. Such promises should not be made. Has Kamala Prasad-Bisessa, at this point in time in any of her speeches, focused on the issues, the core issues of local government? It's focused a lot on crime, and nothing is doing that. But you have the opportunity in the position as opposition to campaign for 5 years. Yes, you have to do your duties as an opposition as well, but all that is part of the campaign leading up to the general election. So I understand where you're coming from, suggesting that let's see how this local government election plays out for the general elections. That has generally been the case for local government elections in the past. I'll disagree with you from the point that I do not think the opposition leader has focused enough on local government issues. Yeah. These are the things that she should not have been brought up on a local government platform. And with regards to budgeted and unbudgeted, again, fair point. Has the opposition leader, though, and just like the government, in all fairness as well, has she stated where are we going to get these funds from? You have budgeted and unbudgeted, but where are the areas that we are going to actually accumulate the income? Where are we going to achieve that income to recognize these expenditures? No, she hasn't. Again, it's just promises.
Just before the next caller, I want to reiterate. That's why I said, and we more or less have agreed, this is a dress rehearsal. This is beyond a dress rehearsal. We're starting general election campaigning. It's already started. But what we're saying is it should not be so. Local government is technically being shortchanged because of it. So we have a caller from Shogunas. Good morning, caller. Morning, caller. You're on the air. Hello? Is caller there?
All right. We'll lost that call. Caller, you have the opportunity to call back in. Sorry, before you go, just very quickly to that caller from Digger Martin. The Prime Minister wasn't actually trying to derail the report. He was expressing the cost of having these commissions of inquiries, and he was shocked when they received a bill of, I think it was somewhere in the vicinity of $35 to $40 million for the lawyers as part of this commission of inquiry into CLICO. The DPP's office didn't send him that bill. The DPP advised him that if he were not to pay those funds, then it could actually derail the commission of inquiry.
Now, with that said, with regards to the governor of the central bank at the time of the CLICO collapse, right? Karen made the case last week, and she also has an article in one of the daily newspapers that central bank governor was part of the process that got us the MOU. The MOU is more or less the thing that prevented, or supposed to prevent, the sale to Proman of the Gluco Energy shares, and that's why the sale was fraudulent. So I'm not too sure if, yes, he might have made a mistake recently. I don't know if you could try and pin everything on him. We have a caller. I think we got Shagonas back on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
This thing about a minimum wage is an artificial concept in Trinidad that is created by governments, where a number of people they just make work but do nothing. We have a number of agencies where the work the department used to do that are paid, like NITCO and all these things, and they do nothing. They get contracts, and the work department would have been better because they would have had the experience to give out the contract. Of course, the worst is CPEP and URP. They do things that government agencies are supposed to do. All you have to do is transfer those people to the relevant government agencies. You get rid of all the overheads, and they will stop competing with our local people, especially in agriculture, who cannot get workers. Any questions, gentlemen?
I agree with that. I have had those thoughts for the last 10 years. With regards to certain industries, certain employers cannot compete with the likes of CPEP and URP and NEDCO and government jobs where people basically get paid to do nothing.
Then why do we have them?
Because politicians are cowards and they don't want the backlash.
Not cowards, cookies.
Well, that too. That too.
Thank you.
I stand corrected. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
I think we were somewhat implying it or alluding to it when Keaton said inefficiencies need to be improved, and this is definitely one area. People might not see the direct relation, but imbalances in the economy then causes politicians to now do all kind of wacky things to compensate. So now this is why we're at a point where the minimum wage is at a debate, where we have, this grant, or cut the fuel subsidy, or introduce this here, blah, 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 blah. And we have so many band-aids on the problem instead of actually trying to figure out, well, what's a medicine to heal the sickness, as opposed to just wrapping the person up in all kind of random band-aids and then wondering, why do you look like a mummy? Basically. I do find the off-budget expenditure, I'm not entirely sure how or what would be the process of that to then say if the checks and balances are being circumvented. Because when the government says, well, we're buying a boat, that's not really like, they're not hiding the expenditure from the public. They're declaring it. So yes, I understand it's off budget. There are a lot of things that are off budget, but to me, a lot of those things come in the form of special purpose companies with regards especially to their debt. Because again, you can't tell me that we had a surplus in our budget when the government owes TNTech $1 billion plus, right? And that's just one. That's just one debt that we know of. AFCL contractors, TTPS contractors.
MTS now.
Potentially drug manufacturing suppliers for the Ministry of Health, and so on and so on. I mean, at this point, I don't know if you could name one ministry or one special purpose company or supplier where the government has not owed money. Notorious already for being slow to pay their contractors, and it just got worse because of COVID.
Actually, that's a very good challenge. That's a very good challenge. Could you name one state entity, state enterprise, that the government does not owe money to? that has accumulated debt. Because it's happening now with MTS. I think MTS was doing fairly well until they took on the responsibilities of EFCL. It has now been stated that it's illegal to just shut down EFCL.
Yes, thank God.
Well, I think that's what the contractors are probably thinking, but we'll see whether or not that goes to the Privy Council. Yes, you mentioned the Water and Sewerage Authority. It's amazing how WASA has more workers than water, but, you know, it's WASA, so it's a state entity. They can have more employees than supplies. Chain-Tech as well. And I like the point that you made, that there is this surplus, and yet still we have these state entities and so much debt. It's because we haven't been able to manage our finances or expenditures.
Well, as you pointed out, what about the COVID loans? Shouldn't that be counted as debt? Was that counted in the budget? I'm not entirely sure, because the budget, the deficit seems to be mostly expenditure that was over.
A lot of the money that we received for COVID-19 was mostly grants or donations, in other words. But there were a couple loans that we took out. There were a couple loans that we took out. And I think most recently, actually, we took out loans with regard to trying to make WASA more efficient. I think we took out, what was it, $100 million
The minister, to be fair to WASA, they are making some inroads with regards to supply. It's just as in Tobago, now they want to put a water park while WASA is trying to catch up with the demand before the water park. We have a caller from Mova. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. We recently celebrated CARICOM 50th anniversary, and one of the concerns was they also discussed energy security in the region. Now, the Point of Pierre refinery, when it was in operation, had contributed towards the CARICOM countries, right? And I'm saying that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, CARICOM and Foreign Affairs, Dr. Amy Brown, he could raise that situation concerning the refinery because it's in his portfolio. And the CARICOM could give recommendation in terms of the refinery. They could also request that the Prime Minister will look at patriotic bid, because we all in this together, you know, we all had to survive, and this refinery was the crown jewel of the Caribbean. And there's an opportunity to also Vikram Bharat, the Minister of Natural Resources from Guyana, he gave the government opportunity to say, look, we will willing to work with you all in terms of our venture, in terms of the refining crude oil, right? And they're building the refinery in 2023, so we need to get this refinery started. So they just will be ready to operationalize Guyana's initiative. And I think the opportunity has been given via CARICOM. We're supposed to try to, the Minister of Foreign Affairs could request to speak to CARICOM concerning the Point of Pierre refinery, and given the recommendations and requesting that the Prime Minister will look at patriotic bid. Also, the lien on the asset was something that was sticking to. So the Prime Minister need to deal with the lien on the asset, because the Finance Minister said that they would dealt with it and they never dealt. Yeah.
Caller, thank you very much. Very good point with regards to the Minister of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs and his entire role in this situation with regards to our natural resources.
One thing though, the issue though is the refinery is our oil refinery. The energy security primarily is about natural gas for electricity generation. The other countries, they're fine with petrol, fuel and gas for vehicles.
The thing is also, I'm wondering to ourselves, I mean, the longer the refinery remains, I suppose, mothballed, it's
I don't know.
more cost is going to be to operate it, to restart it. And I suppose any mechanical engineer will tell you that. Where are we going to get the oil, though? Should we restart the refinery?
Well, remember, Guyana seems to be going
Guyana
with
is
its
going in their
smaller
own
refinery,
direction. Yes,
right?
Guyana is going in its own direction.
Now, one wonders, maybe they're starting small and then they'll make an even bigger facility as production ramps up. One wonders what their long-term plans are in that respect. I have not read into anything past the fact that they are making a refinery, the first one, which is smaller than Petrotrin. The problem with Petrotrin's refinery is not even, to me, the age, and I think the sticking point has always been the lien on the refinery, because they use the debt accrued to pay off severance. It's how the government wound up Petrotrin is the problem. So one could argue the lien on the refinery that needs to be cleared by whoever takes it over is, to some extent, potentially unfair, but that's how the government set it up, and that's what the government is demanding. I don't think the government wants to eat that debt, but if no one's going to buy it, then the government might have to anyway, so perhaps they need to pay that off themselves in order to sell the refinery and get it back functional, so at least we could get tax revenue or sell it to patriotic so OWTU
just bear in mind that
could put their money where their mouth is.
Just bear in mind, any company that is wanting to purchase the refinery at this point, government's going to have to make considerable concessions.
Yeah, because nobody is going to be in competition for that. It's a buyer's market, not a seller's market. And it seems as though the government is trying to act as though, no, we're in control, it's a seller's market. No, it's not. No, it's not. In a world where everybody still wants to go green, despite the fact that green technology is still premature, in a world where Guyana is saying we rather build things from scratch because it seems to be more economical, why is it going to be a seller's market?
I think most recently the chairman of Parafuel, Heritage, actually said, make us an offer for the refinery.
Yes.
So and then
they're still looking.
And then I think just up to a year ago, just under a year ago actually, so within the last year, the Minister of Energy said there are a number of parties that were interested and have expressed some level of interest. Then you've got a couple months later, you've got the CEO of Heritage saying, "No, make us an offer." So you really wonder what's taking place there. And I myself, mind you, when Patriotic put in a bid, I think was it for $700 million US or something like that. Where were they getting that financing from?
Right, so the flip side is the government might not need to pay off the debt, but use the proceeds from selling the refinery, so we're not necessarily going to make a profit to pay off the debt. But back to the original point, I suspect the Dragon gas deal will also be part of regional energy security, because I believe when they had that summit, it's included talking about supply of natural gas to a couple other...
Part of the license that the United States granted to Trinidad and Tobago was to supply...
I think it was 2 islands, right? Was it
2 or 3
St. Vincent and Grenada or Jamaica?
In the Caribbean, yeah.
Yeah, so that is something that our Minister of Foreign Affairs, that is on his plate. We have a caller from Shogunas again? Oh, I'm sorry. Right, yes, we are more or less time to wrap up. But yeah, that energy security, though, I think in the long run, that's also something to be concerned about.
I tell you what, I would be most pleased one day if we could have a conversation about Trinidad and Tobago's economy and where we're heading to in the future without having to bring up oil and gas. I think it'll be quite... I think that'll be a most eye-opening.
Here's the thing. I've said this before, and it's going to be an unfortunate truth. We are accustomed to a standard of living that includes oil and gas, and we are not prepared because we did not plan ahead for when it runs out, and it's more or less there.
Well, yes, we didn't plan ahead is one thing, but more so we didn't manage our wealth.
Right.
We never managed our wealth here in TNT.
So we're no longer, we're like the old rich people of the Caribbean, as much as technically our money was new money, and the money's run out. We're still trying to appear to be rich.
So whilst every generation would have faced adversity, and they would have. There was the global market crash, recessions, the Great Recessions, but bear in mind, there was still a lot more opportunity back then as compared to now.
No, but anything that happened before 1970, the people that were living in TNT at the time, they were accustomed to not having this great wealth.
So
we got spoiled.
Generation after generation, Sean, as much as we have benefited from certain things, for example, free healthcare, the healthcare system.
Free education.
It's not the greatest. Free education, yes.
And look at what's happening with the education system.
And even look at the state and infrastructure of our schools now. So all that just to bear in mind.
Government schools are basically unofficially taxing parents when it's supposed to be free. Right? Think about that.
Again,
healthcare is one thing, but think about that.
I remember when I was at school, you had to donate a bale of paper to the school. I remember that as well.
Yeah, but was that a government school?
Well, no.
Right, but I'm talking about government schools, which are supposed to be free.
Yeah, no, I think they need the bale of paper more than the private schools.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they actually need a lot more. From what I understand, what's even taking place in these offices.
Hey, you want to know some of the hardest working people in the country? Ironically, you would think it's not this case. Private school teachers.
I think no.
Some of the
even teachers within the public sector, I wouldn't.
The public school teachers work hard.
I think they have a lot of them that work.
Not all of them work.
Yeah. And there are quite a number of them who make the effort. I can't use a broad brush to paint all of them. I don't know.
I'm not.
But I do have my experiences. I think the younger teachers now, the younger generation of teachers,
I'm using 2 or 3 brushes, right? I'm having general groups
Well, I tell you what, we could expand on this tomorrow morning. Have a good day. Hope it's not too hot.
I know, right? Today is a good day to have a hot day. Oy vey.
Makes you wonder what the dry season is going to be like.
Yes! Oh no.
Anyway, I'm Keaton Shaw. That's Shaw Michael Small. This has been Talking Points on WESN Constant Capital. Remember, today is a good day to have a good day.
Oh no.
And we'll see you again tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
WESN.
I'm Andy Johnson, and you're watching WESN, the content capital.
August 14th, local government election night returns. Understand what's happening in your community. WESN presents our special election coverage with a panel of trusted citizens and context you will not get elsewhere. Special coverage begins from 7 p.m. on the premier platform for Caribbean content, WESN.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive. It is not rehabilitative.
We, the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole. It's for all of us in public.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m., only on WESN, Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
This city can't hold me, my vibe's too high, and my heart it told me jump right now, you will touch the sky. Feel my love unfolding like a laughing flame. All who did not know me when not done, they gon' know the name. Million people coming down, dancing to a song. Love is life and life is love, blessings from above. Can you feel the love that's in the air? Well, if you feel it, let me hear you say, dancing, moving everywhere. If you feel it, let me hear you say, na 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 na, eh na 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 on my game. It's the way you lift me up. I could never give it up, no.
This is the way we celebrate independence. This is how it should be done. An event like this brings everybody out. All different race, creed, everything. This is our country. And how is the best way to celebrate our independence? With our national anthem. The vision I had 6 years ago, trying to make people happy. We started this event not to stop. This event must continue. And at independence, we could celebrate it together as a country. Even though the hard things, struggles, we will always remain together as one people. Thank you.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
To give a civil society polish to their government, indeed try and create something hybrid probably, and indeed it goes to show that they are setting up shop and making sure they have control over the country. Also, indeed, the army is getting ready for now. It is quite clear that they want to stay in power, but it's important to remind everyone that in coups like this one, what's very difficult when negotiating with a junta is that, of course, the generals who have taken power have a hard job leaving it, simply because when coups collapse, usually those behind them end up in prison or worse. So obviously it's difficult to negotiate with them, and you have to find some sort of exit strategy so that everyone keeps face, which is difficult, of course.
Really interesting. For the moment, no sign that they're going back. It seems they're appearing to try to legitimise their own regime. James, great to have that context. James Andre, our senior reporter. Now to the Women's World Cup next. The last 16 have been whittled down to the final 8 teams. 2 games today saw France go through against Morocco, a 4-0 victory, and a moment of magic for Colombia led to Jamaica being knocked out. Well, let's cross to Australia and speak to our correspondent Rochelle Harrison-Pless, who's watching with the Fan Zone supporters in Sydney. Well, France, a team ranked 5th in the world against Morocco ranked 72, is it? It would have been a big upset, but seemed very comfortable for France in the end.
Yeah, quite comfortable. France were on fire tonight. They burst out of the blocks, really dictating the tempo from the get-go. And that first half was absolutely magical for the French team. They showed no mercy. It was Diani who set the pace after just 15 minutes scoring there. 5 minutes later, it was Kenza Dali who doubled the score. And by 23 minutes, it was Eugénie Le Sommer who made it 3-0. Now, by the second half, the Atlas Lionesses were hoping for a Moroccan miracle as they attempted to apply slightly more pressure on the French defence, but in the end it was that French flair that really shone through. And we even had, we were even treated to a fourth goal for France by Eugénie Le Sommer. Now, France are set for a showdown against the tournament co-hosts Australia, and that's going to be a tough one for them. And I have to admit, it's going to be tough for me as well, being French-Australian.
Oh, it's a very strong-looking few European sides now. Spain, France, both going into the next round with sheer confidence. The other game today, the Reggae Girls of Jamaica out. Moment of clash shown by Colombia, and that sets up, is it a quarter-final game? Coffee Growers against the Lionesses.
That's right. Colombia made history tonight. This is the first time that they have reached a quarter-final at a Women's World Cup, winning their match 1-0 against Jamaica. It was Colombia's Catalina Usme who scored the only goal of that match during the 51st minute. The South Americans really asserting their authority over Jamaica's Reggae Girls, who now go home. But meanwhile, Colombia's prize is a quarter-final clash against the European champions, England, on what's been dubbed Super Saturday. So first up, we've got Australia versus France in Brisbane, Mianjin, and then England versus Colombia here in Sydney, Gadigal. And that will be an interesting one because England will be, of course, without their key player, star striker Lauren James, who, of course, was red-carded yesterday in that match against Nigeria for deliberately stomping on the back of Nigeria's Michelle Alozie. Lauren James has since apologised, so we're yet to see whether that ban will just be the one match or perhaps even more. So that will be an interesting game to watch indeed. But first, before those two quarterfinals, we've got two other matches, Spain versus Netherlands and Japan versus Sweden. Both of those are happening in New Zealand on Friday. So it's a big weekend of football ahead, and it's really, really exciting because we're getting to the pointy end of the tournament.
Just a brief point from you, Rochelle. I mean, I look at the scenes behind you. It's quiet now and dark in the fan zone. I've seen some commentators talking about the atmosphere not being like the Men's World Cup, not quite feeling it in Sydney. What's it been like for you at the fan zone and in and around the town?
Okay, well, hold on. Right now, the fan zone is dark and it's quiet because once the match ended, once it was full time, we were just all kicked out. We're actually the only ones left in the fan zone. But there have been hundreds of people here tonight, both for the France-Morocco game and earlier the Colombia-Jamaica game. There were hundreds of Colombian fans, loud fans. The Moroccans were loud as well. They were playing their instruments. There's actually been a really fantastic atmosphere here in the fan zone. We've been here a few times now. At the stadiums, it's just incredible. Being at Stadium Australia last night, seeing the Matildas defeat Denmark, that was such a wonderful atmosphere. It was, I mean, the roof was lifted off the stadium. That's just how loud the Australian fans were, especially when Sam Kerr came off the bench. I am, of course, referring to the Australian captain. So I have to say, no, the atmosphere has been wonderful and a lot of people are really, really getting into the games.
Fantastic. Ya boo to the naysayers. Rochelle, great to hear from you. Rochelle Harrison-Bless, our correspondent in Sydney. Well, stay with us here on France 24. We'll be back in 15 minutes with a full news update.
Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world, coming up. With the Taliban banning girls from secondary schools and universities, we meet the Afghan families who've risked everything by fleeing to neighbouring Pakistan to ensure their daughters get an education. We also head to the Kenyan village, which bans men as it offers a refuge to women and girls facing the risks of female genital mutilations, domestic abuse or child marriage. And bucking sexism, the sport of bull riding, once reserved for just men in Nicaragua, is undergoing a major change as women riders are now taking part in rodeos. But first, and the UN estimates that some 3 million girls have been banned from high school since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan back in August 2021. The regime also blocking women from attending university as well as from working in many jobs. In desperation, tens of thousands of Afghan families have fled to neighbouring Pakistan to ensure their daughters receive an education. It's far from an ideal destination since Pakistan does not offer much in terms of work prospects for Afghan refugees. Our team on the ground sent us this report.
Dozens of Afghan children enrolled in the school after their families found refuge in Pakistan. Zeba Hussain is the founder of this charity-run school that educates children coming from the most deprived and marginalized communities. She takes pride in opening her doors to Afghan students, especially girls. These 3 sisters found refuge in Pakistan along with their parents and are undocumented.
तो आप इधर क्यों आए?
उधर लड़ाई है, तालिबान नहीं है। वो लड़कियों को स्कूल नहीं छोड़ देते कि स्कूल जाते हैं। पढ़ाई करने घर से बाहर निकले, उसको मारते हैं, उसको सर मारते हैं, उसको बेइज्जती करते हैं, उसकी करते हैं। वो बाहर रहती है, उसको कंची मारती है। उधर हम लोग सब लड़के, हमारा भाई भी नहीं है उस वजह से।
मुश्किल था?
बहुत मुश्किल से।
डर लगता था?
उसको पसंद है, लड़की को नहीं बोलते तो मेरा से शादी करोगे, तो उसके साथ शादी करोगे। वो इतना बड़ा है ना, जबरदस्ती से उसके साथ शादी करोगे।
उस लड़की को?
उसको मतलब पानी أما جي وطن شنورامس ومازمونيس.
Our country is the only one like that. I feel bad. We came here and we see that everyone has the right to education, has the right to go to school, but our country is destroyed and the schools are closed.
More than 1.5 million undocumented Afghan refugees live in Pakistan. They cannot access free public education. Zeba's school is one of the few options they have.
Our school is open to anyone who wants to study. I don't care about race, religion, about the status, about anything. So it's really a humanitarian school because right now they need education, they need guidance, they need socialization. They should be able to be happy. They don't want to be isolated.
Like most of the children here, Natasha and her sisters live in sheer poverty. Since they have been in exile, they have to work to support their families.
يكوني موجود وبيبر ماس بيبر ما تمس بس نفنو انتقال ما تمارا
شكرا بخواني کوشش کنی درسایتان بخوانی افغانستان حالات خوب نیست اینجا ما مسافر هستیم حالات ما خوب نیست انا بکشی بری بکسایتان بانی بری بلا کارتان
ها بله.
Every afternoon, the sisters spend several hours in front of a Sufi shrine. They sell rose petals to pilgrims, earning just a few hundred rupees per day. Pakistan's conservative society frowns upon the public presence of unsupervised teenage girls. The men here don't respect them.
I feel really bad here. People don't look at me like I'm just a regular girl, but like something else. The men here also bully me and make humiliating comments and put us down. They say Afghan girls are like this, Afghan girls are like that. It makes me want to end my life.
Many Afghan refugees have settled in the south of Islamabad, where it's cheaper to live. Some have even created private learning centers like this one. Girls and boys from middle and high school learn together, something unimaginable under the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. The students in this class are learning English, hoping to one day get a visa for Europe or North America.
Buddy, what's your favorite country in the world?
My favorite country is Canada because the country is very beautiful.
Would you like to visit Canada one day?
Yes.
Okay, very good. It actually makes me very happy when I see my Afghan students they're attending in this center, in this institute, and they're coming to learn something. I just always remind them, right now in Afghanistan, girls are banned from the education, and they are hungry for this kind of opportunity, but you guys already have this kind of opportunity. Try to use this.
I feel so happy to study, to be sitting here with my classmates. I'm so happy that we came here and that I can continue my studies.
Parichar was able to resume her studies. It was for her that her mother, a cleaning lady, took the difficult decision of moving to Pakistan despite the financial difficulties.
I thought Kabul was no longer a good place for us. What if my children end up illiterate like their father or me? We had to immigrate somewhere where they could study and where their future would be better. It's a heavy burden, but people can do anything for their children.
Integration for Afghan refugees in Pakistan is a huge challenge. Only a few manage to get refugee status and access skilled jobs.
Now, what happens if you're a girl or a woman facing the risks of female genital mutilation, domestic abuse or child marriage? Well, if you're living in Kenya's northeastern Samburu region, you can head to the village of Umoja, whose sole purpose is to provide women and girls with a refuge from gender-based violence.
A moment of joy that belies these women's traumatic pasts. Umoja in the northwestern Samburu region of Kenya looks like a typical Maasai village, except for a crucial detail. There are no men. Only women and their children are allowed to live here, in a community that seeks to provide a safe haven for victims of gender-based violence.
No one has to have an unplanned baby. These girls need to be educated and choose their own partners. Not like the old days when their fathers married them off to old rich men. Women should choose who they love.
The village was founded some 30 years ago when around a dozen women were cast out by their husbands for saying they'd been raped by British soldiers. Hundreds of others alleged similar abuse, though UK authorities cleared the troops of wrongdoing. As word of the village spread, other women fled to Umoja to escape forced marriages and violence. Over 40% of Kenyan women will suffer sexual or domestic abuse at some point in her lifetime.
I'm very proud to live in this village because no one is stressing me out and my husband can't hurt me here.
The women make jewellery that they sell to tourists, making enough money to support themselves and send their children to school. Residents also visit surrounding villages to warn other women about the dangers of early marriage and genital mutilation, both commonplace in rural Kenya. In Samburu culture, women are considered subordinate to men, but the residents of Umoja are on a mission to change that.
And finally, rodeos in Nicaragua are massively popular with the crowds, but the spectacle of watching men attempting to ride bulls is slowly changing, with more women now joining the sport. However, not only are they wrestling to stay on the bull, but they're also fighting resistance from fellow male riders.
Her helmet fastened, Evelyn Perez prepares to enter the arena. One hand on the rope, the other for balance. The goal is to stay on the bull for at least 8 seconds. Hundreds of spectators have come to watch the show at a festival in Tipatapa. It's not often that they see a woman taking part in the sport.
I've wanted to ride since I was a child, since I was 12 or 15 years old. My brother used to ride, and I told him that I wanted to as well. And he said no, it's for men. But I think that if men can do it, we can do it too.
When she's not riding, the 33-year-old is a cook and a mother to 2 children. She earns $200 every time she mounts a bull. But it's one of the world's most dangerous sports, and she regularly suffers injuries. A prayer before entering the arena is part of her routine. And as much as Nicaraguans were sceptical about women getting involved in rodeo, the other riders have accepted her as one of their own.
I'm not the only female rider. There are several of us. For instance, on the 30th of December, I was in a competition in Palmares, Costa Rica, and there were 8 other women.
Perez is aware of the physical disadvantage when it comes to hanging onto an animal weighing hundreds of kilos. But she hopes more women will break the stereotype by entering the arena of bull riding.
And that's all for this edition. We'd love to hear your suggestions for the 51%, so don't hesitate to get in touch either via Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. And you can catch our previous programs on our website. So until our next show, bye for now.
A programme about women who are reshaping our world. We meet those who seek equality, be it in the boardroom or at the village well. The 51% brings you stories from across the globe about the women who are challenging the way we think.
The 51%, presented by Annette Young on France 24 and France24.com.
You can choose Elizabeth, Sarah, Kate, as well as Jeannie, Julia or Catherine. But from July 20th to August 20th, we'll choose Alex. Experience the Women's World Cup with France 24.
WESN. Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sarah Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Venezuelan baby severely beaten by his uncle. Nicholas Paul grabs silver at the UCI World Cycling Champs. And internationally, witnesses recount brawl at Montgomery Riverfront. Now for the details. Doctors are doing all they can to save the life of a 1-year-old boy of Venezuelan descent who was severely beaten by his uncle during an attack in Valencia on Saturday. The incident took place at Mount Cartel, Valencia at around 11 p.m. According to reports, the baby's father was attacked and beaten by a relative, following which the man then turned his attention to the baby. Both baby and father were found battered and bleeding. The 28-year-old relative has since been arrested by police and remains in custody. Police said the baby boy received injuries to his eyes, forehead, a broken leg, and other injuries about the body. Nicholas Paul made his mark on the UCI World Cycling Championships, securing silver for Trinidad and Tobago Monday in the elite men's sprint event. Paul sustained his only 2 losses in the competition at the Sir Chris Hoy Velodrome in Scotland in the best-of-3 final at the hands of 2-time Olympic gold medalist Harry Leverson, who picked up a 5th world sprint title. Still, the TNT cyclist adds a 2nd silver to his collection after picking up time trial silver at the 2021 World Championships. Internationally, bystanders said the incident began when a worker tried to clear a dock along the Alabama River so that the Harriet II riverboat could dock. A group of rowdy boaters refused to move their pontoon and attacked the dock worker when he untied the boat to make way for the Harriet II. They just didn't think the rules applied to them. It was so avoidable. This never had to have happened, said a witness, Leslie Mohorta, 52, who was aboard the Harriet II, said in an interview. Video of the incident shows a group of what appear to be white men running to the boardwalk one by one and attacking the worker who is black. The man who was initially attacked and the people involved in the fight have not been publicly named. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I am Sarah Ali. Thanks for watching.
Please help me help you. Remember, elections have consequences. Make the right choice.
WESN.
Good day and welcome to this week's episode of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. I am your host, Rondell Dono, attorney at law. Once again, I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to bring the law and you. Of course, you can stream us on the traditional media as well as our social media, WESN CC on all our platforms. Especially, you can also listen to us at Strictly Legal with RondellDonowa.com. The last week, of course, you would have been very, very excited actually to view one episode about medical malpractice with Mr. Robin Otway, who is an attorney at law, and he's very experienced in the field of medical legal practices. And of course, last week we recapped basically about what is medical negligence, what are the consequences of such negligence, what are the tests, right, that one uses to establish whether a doctor or hospital has been liable for such negligence, as well as some of the damages. Of course, time was obviously beyond us, and we had to now bring him back for another episode, or for part 2 of the legal implications of medical malpractice. And Mr. Otway is no stranger to the field, and of course I will welcome him back. Robin, good day. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Great to be here, Rondell. Enjoy the exercise.
And great to have you as well. I know, as you said, it's very hot in Mexico at the moment.
It is where I am. Northeast Mexico, temperatures get up high 40s.
Wow.
48. It's not unusual. Sometimes at 9, 10 o'clock, it's like 32, 33.
Well, at least we could be grateful at least for our humid weather here.
But it's dry. Semi-desert, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, thank you for making the effort to sit with us again. Just a recap in terms of medical negligence. Could you just bring out just a recap in terms of the definition of what is negligence?
As I defined it early last week, a doctor is required to practice up to the standard expected of a reasonably competent practitioner in the particular field. And I gave examples of the GP and the obstetrician gynecologist. And that in any procedure recommended, which could include taking particular pharmaceuticals, drugs is a bad word these days, therapy, surgery in particular, the practice that is, the procedure that is recommended must be one that is approved by a responsible body of medical opinion. Those are the two basic tests.
And of course, you know, we've delved quite extensively into exactly, as you said, the tests and various examples. But of course, we want to touch on, we want to continue the discussion. More importantly, the question of a doctor who has performed a surgery or surgical procedure, whatever it may be, on a patient, whether it is in private or a public health facility, and something happened to that patient, whether they has now become disabled or they had died. Who exactly is responsible?
Okay, that is a particular, as a good cook, a particular, something special or specific about medical negligence. A simple example, agency is where, in everyday life, for example, a real estate agent, I'm going to compare a real estate agent with a building contractor. The real estate agent acts how I instruct him. I may tell him a particular price for my house. He may come back with a lower price, but he has no authority to accept it unless I tell him to accept. The building contractor, you don't tell him how to build a foundation or install the electrics and plumbing, etc. He uses his independent and expert decision-making, independent expert mind. Now, the doctor, particularly the surgeon, nobody tells him wherever he's employed, whether it's government hospital or in a private institution. The doctor, surgeon, exercises his own professional judgment. But the precedents, the cases decided that where the doctor, for example, in a public health institution, in a government hospital, the patient does not choose the doctor. So the institution is relied upon to ensure that a reasonably competent surgeon is practicing within its four walls. So within a government hospital, the surgeon or other doctor, whoever be, or nurse, or anyone makes a mistake that affects a patient, the government hospital is individually liable. Normally, if you bring an action like that, you bring it against the hospital and the doctor. That's a normal practice. Everybody who could be liable. Now, with the private clinic, it's different. It is normally different where surgery is involved.
No, just pause a bit. Sorry about that. So you're saying that in public institutions, the hospital is the one that will be the liable party, basically.
The hospital is liable for the doctor's mistakes, but he is also individually liable.
Certainly. And now we are getting into private institution where as you said, it may differ.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, in the private institution, normally if I'm going for an operation, I have chosen my doctor. I want a particular doctor. I'm paying good money, so I choose. I want the surgeon of my choice to operate upon me. And surgeons will operate at different private institutions where they have what they call privileges, the right to use their facilities. They have an arrangement, let's say, with Sinclair or West Shore or Medical Associates or wheresoever. So if I choose my doctor and my doctor makes a mistake, my doctor is responsible for his mistake, not the private institution who did not choose the doctor. Now, I may go into a private institution in an emergency where an accident and emergency doctor whom I have not chosen but is put there by the private institution, he makes a mistake, then the clinic is, like the government hospital, the private institution is responsible for the doctor they have chosen and who happens to treat me in a situation like that. Hope that's clear enough.
So is it that, if, as you said, if I choose a doctor and the doctor has elected, or let's say the doctor is whether it's an independent consultant at a particular private institution, the doctor is held liable. However, if I let's say I retained the institution itself to perform the surgery, then is the institution is liable.
If the institution is the one that has put the doctor in place to carry out the procedure.
Okay.
Right? Supposed to be choosing my doctor to do the operation upon me in a private setting, not a government hospital. When I go into the government hospital, I take whatever doctor is on duty who will perform the surgery upon me. I may be lucky enough to get a doctor I like, but I haven't chosen the doctor.
But then let's say you choose the doctor and it is not the doctor's fault, but it's the facility. Let's say there has been some defective equipment, because obviously the doctor is just there to use his skills, which is his hand. But in terms of the equipment,
it's not always the doctor's fault. Sometimes there may be, sometimes it could be a nurse making an error in terms of when medicine is administered. Post-surgery, it can happen. The clinic, private institution may not have certain equipment or may not use the equipment when they should have used it. Okay, so the clinic will exercise its own judgment, particularly with post-operative care. After an operation, the nurses have to monitor, they have to check vital signs, blood pressure, breathing, etc., pulse. And if they don't do that properly, then they could be liable.
I totally get you. So in terms of investigation, let's say, for instance, you are now to investigate that particular, who is liable? How can one proceed to that investigation? Is it that you now have to retain an expert, as we will now get into?
I gave examples the last time of what may be obvious. For example, I go in to have my right leg amputated or below the knee amputation on the right, and they do it on the left. Okay, that's obvious. You don't need an expert to say the doctor should not have done this. I gave another example of what I call the retained object, where something is left inside a patient during the surgery. You know, there are pads put in. There are cases when even metal objects have been left in, which of course is obvious. It may not manifest until sometime after, but the surgeon cannot get away. It's his responsibility to ensure that objects inserted, put into the patient's body are removed. He will have a nurse normally who will count, and in the highest form of practice, there's a blackboard and they note the things that go in and they make sure they come out. But the surgeon is responsible if that is not properly done. The clinic could also be responsible, institution could also be responsible, should be. But where the medical legal area, I would describe as very complex. So in normal medical legal case you're suing your doctor or clinic or hospital, you will need an expert input because it's not always black and white. You know, a patient may die on an operating table, but it may be that they had some problem with their heart or something. I mean, before a patient goes in for an operation, both the surgeon and the anesthetist must take a proper history. But if the patient doesn't say, look, or the patient will be unaware they have a heart issue, and you die on the operating table, sadly. So you need an expert to review all the medical records. You will give them the history, the client's statement, and you want an expert opinion because the case will normally stand or fall. You may be successful or not at the end of the trial based on expert evidence.
And of course, that expert evidence, as we would have discussed, it's obviously, as you would say, expert is someone who is familiar or who has particular experience in that area of medical practice.
A doctor.
Yes, a doctor, basically. No, I note that, and I would have also stated that, you know, sometimes, at least in Trinidad, there's a perception that medical practitioners, particularly doctors, they pick up for one another, right? So in terms of getting that particular medical expert to testify against another institution or doctor, because I mean most times you find that doctors, whether in their private practices, they would interchange in terms of the facilities that they practice in. So how do you circumvent or how do you avoid having such an issue where doctors are not cooperating, rather?
Yes, I mean, it is a problem. I would not deny that. Now, it is not that you cannot find doctors within Trinidad and Tobago who are prepared to testify against other doctors. It may be common with someone who may say is retired, but there is that kind of, if I may call it, brotherhood or sisterhood, a collegiality. They are afraid of getting blackballed within the medical profession. You know, their colleagues don't like them anymore, don't trust them, and often they know each other well. So not always, but let me say that I have seen Trinidad doctors testify against Trinidad doctors. It's rare. In complicated cases, you normally look for an expert outside of Trinidad and Tobago. I have spoken to a doctor in Barbados who is willing to help. But